Hello and welcome to Louise Singleton Creations. Let's Resin recently sent me a set of their silicone split cups and I was dying to try them out with resin. The thing is, I always wondered what would happen because we all know resin has a mind of its own. It does its own thing. And even if you pour something which looks beautiful, 10 minutes later it can be completely transformed into something else. Sometimes more beautiful, sometimes a disappointment. So I wasn't really sure how this would turn out, but I really wanted to have a go. So join me today and see what happens. For the base of my split cup pour, I decided to try out my new Let's Resin tray mould. And to fill it, I decided to use Aqua Cast water-based casting compound. First, I weighed the water in a large plastic jug and then I added the Aqua Cast powder to the water and gave it a really good mix. And I've said it before and I will say it again, I absolutely love how easy it is to mix this Aqua Cast casting compound. Because you're mixing it with water instead of the acrylic binder, it mixes so easily to a lovely smooth lump-free finish. The properties of the acrylic binder which you get in the two-part casting compounds are really quite important for the finished result. But don't worry, with AquaCast, everything that's in the acrylic binder has been fused into the powder, so that's why you only have to mix it with water and not the acrylic binder. So once that was mixed, I added some black Jesmonite pigment and gave it a good mix. I was going for a black tray, but I didn't quite add enough of the pigment, so it ended up being dark grey. But in the end, I quite liked it, so that wasn't a problem. Then it was just a case of pouring it into the mould. I like to start by filling up the sides first. So I started it off and kind of followed it around as it was filling up. You can probably tell the way I did it actually. And the way I did it, it stopped it from getting kind of pockets of air trapped. If I'd just filled it from the middle and let it all flow down, there'd be more chance of trapping pockets of air in there. So that's why I did it around the edges in this way, and it worked really well and I didn't get any trapped air bubbles or air pockets. So once I'd finished pouring the sides of the mould, I stopped pouring and gave it a good tap around the edges, a little bit of manipulation just to move it around a bit and get those bubbles moving and rising to the top, so that they can escape. And then I just filled the rest of it up with the rest of my AquaCast mixture. Then once again I gave it a good tap and I gave the table a good bang and I left it to cure for about 2 hours just to make sure it was completely ready. And then once it was cool, and that's when you know it's time to demold, because it's just cooled down, because it does get really warm and then it cools down and then you can demold it. So it was about 2 hours and then once it was cool I demolded it. And just look how smooth and bubble-free that finish is. This is why I love AquaCast so much. Honestly, it never lets me down. I love it to bits. So right, now it needs sealing. Before it can be sealed, you need to just get rid of any sharp edges. So I'm just going around the edge on the underside with my nail file, and I think they say you should let it fully cure before you sand it, but I actually find that it sands better if it's still a little bit soft. So if you do it just after you've demolded it, I just find it works better for me doing it that way. But, you find your own ways of doing things, don't you? So once that was done, I dusted it off and I sealed it. Now, really, you should wait for it to be fully cured before you seal it, but for the sake of the video, I really needed to get on with it and get it done. So I did do it straight away. I shouldn't have done, really, but it turned out fine. So to seal it, I used the Hydroflow sealer from Elichem Resins, and it works really well. It does need quite a lot on the back because it's so porous where you've poured it. On the other side where it's really nice and smooth, you don't need much at all. But on the back I did find I needed quite a lot. After spraying it on, I just use a kitchen sponge to spread it around and completely cover all the surfaces. You could use a paintbrush, but I just find a sponge works better. Then after an hour, I repeated the process and then I just left it until the next day before adding the resin. And that way I knew it was completely dry and all ready. The resin I'm using today is Resins 80-ounce kit. And they sent me this a while ago and I hadn't opened it. So this was, I was just expecting to find 2 bottles of resin in there. And I was really surprised when I opened it up. Wait until you see what's inside. So you get a Resin silicone stirring stick, a disposable apron and table protector. You also get a spreader or a smoother, depending on what you want to use it for. But what I was most excited about was the huge silicone cup. I love those, they're so good. And inside the silicone cup, there was also a set of mica powders. Honestly, I wasn't expecting any of this, so I was really, really pleased. You get a purple, a gold, a watermelon kind of red, a black, a green and a blue. So they're great. I'd already decided on my pigments. So yeah, I already had pigments put aside, but they look great. I haven't tried them yet. I will do though. And then underneath the pigments, there was more things. There was disposable gloves and some of those little plastic mixing cups for when you're doing just a small amount, which I do find really handy. So yeah, thank you Let's Resin for all those little extras, which I really wasn't expecting. So let's get on to the resin. You get 2 bottles and there's the part A and part B, and they're a 1-to-1 ratio, so it's nice and easy to mix, and you mix them by volume, not weight. You also get a little booklet which gives you full instructions and everything you need to know about the resin, which is so useful. Let's Resin always gives such useful information in whatever you get, so that's really good. Okay, let's get started with the resin part of this project. First I needed to mix my resin, but before I did that I actually warmed the 2 bottles up in my sink with some warm water in, because my room is very cold, and if you pour the resin when it's very cold you find that it has lots of bubbles in and it's very thick, and that's with any kind of epoxy resin. It doesn't like the cold. So if you've got a cold house, warm it up first in a water bath and it's much, much better. I wasn't sure how much I was going to need, so I was guessing a little bit. So I poured 4 fluid ounces of part A and 4 fluid ounces of part B, all into 1 measuring cup. If you're not very confident with pouring out and measuring the resin, or you have maybe a bit of a shaky hand, use 2 cups and then combine them afterwards, because obviously if you go over with one of them your ratio is going to be out. But I was very careful and I stopped at the 4 and then carried on to the 8 with the other part of the resin, and it was fine. Once you've poured out your 2 parts, you need to give it a good mix. Don't mix too fast because you'll make it very bubbly. Just take your time and mix for about 2 to 3 minutes. Do you see all those streaks in the resin? That's how you know it's not mixed. You need to mix and mix until there's no streaks left in the resin. The split cup I decided to use for this project has 5 sections in it, so I got 4 silicone cups and separated the resin into 5 altogether, so I left some in the mixing cup. And then I mixed in my mica powders from Let's Resin. The colours I decided on in the end were the seashell colour, which is my favourite, and some gold and orange and blue, and then the clear as well. Then I just poured each colour into the sections of the split cup. Now, this was my very first time ever using a split cup. And I realised afterwards I should have half filled each section at a time, because if you fully fill one section like I did, it pushes out the walls of that section and makes the other section smaller. So do it a little bit at a time is my advice. Right, we're ready. And I decided to go in diagonal lines for this, and I really didn't know what to expect, but straight away I was really enjoying the patterns it was making. I have discovered that it's very much a case of trial and error with this method. You can imagine if I'd put my cup at a different angle, the colours would have been more separated. But this was the way it was comfortable to do, and I didn't really give it much thought, but it still worked. I just really need to experiment with different ways of pouring it in for different effects, and I think I'll have lots of fun doing that. But I was really pleased with how it turned out in the end. Maybe if I did another one, I would choose different colours. I'm not completely sure that those colours went together well. And because it ended up being quite a stripy finish, it makes me think of a tiger. So maybe a black instead of the blue would have been good. Or maybe a black and white theme would be nice as well for the stripes, to give it like a zebra feel. But anyway, you'll see in a moment how it turned out when it was cured. But first of all, before we do that, I had some leftover resin. I mixed up too much. And I happened to have a pot mould handy. And it's the pot you will have seen me use before. If you watch all my videos, you'll have seen it. And it's the base of the Let's Resin mushroom mould, which is one of my favourite moulds because it's the perfect shape for a candle vessel. Now, I know what you're thinking. Louise, it's resin, you can't make a candle vessel. Bear with me, just bear with me, trust me. Anyway, as you can see, all I did was empty the rest of what was in the split cup into the mould, and I didn't quite have enough. It's typical. I went from having too much resin to not enough. I scraped everything out of all my cups and my split cup and still not quite enough. So what I did actually do was I got a spoon and I stole a little bit from the corner of my tray just to completely fill that up, and then it was done. And then the next day it was ready to get out of the mould. Let's see how it looked. Right then, it was the next morning and I couldn't wait. Couldn't wait to look at it. And you can probably tell because my dressing gown belt keeps coming into the screen. You can see that I couldn't even wait to get dressed. So I came and had a look, and I was really happy with how it turned out. Like I said before, I'm not completely convinced I like the colours, but I love the effects from the split cup pour. Let's have a look at the vessel that I made. There we have it. And you know what? As always, my favourite thing is the thing I made with the leftover bits of resin. That happens to me every time, and I love that. Isn't that amazing, the way all the different colours are they're still kind of separate, but at the same time they're merging, and I just love those colours. And so, yeah, like I said, I was thinking, what am I going to do with that pot? It's got to go with the tray, it matches perfectly. But I can't put a candle in it because it's resin. But then I thought, and I came up with a solution. And the solution will actually be in another video coming soon. But here I'll show you the result of the solution. So I normally dislike those battery-operated candles. Dislike them so much. But I found a way of adapting one and making it look like it was an actual, candle filling the whole vessel. And that's going to be a little video coming soon, probably just a quick one, because I just wanted to show you how I did that. But this one would have been too long if I'd added it here. But yeah, I think that looks much better. And now I have one that looks like a real candle, but isn't a real candle. Anyway, what do you think to the results of my first ever split cup pour? Not too bad, is it? Obviously I can improve on it, but for my first attempt, I think it's pretty good. All the links to everything I got from Let's Resin and Elichem Resins will be in the description, along with my discount codes. And if you liked the video, could you give it a thumbs up, please, because that'll really help it to get recommended to other people. And I will see you again next time. Bye for now.